Well, good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here on the site of the Gene Zwadeski Center here. And I want to thank Clark Builders for welcoming us to their construction site where they're literally helping us to build Alberta. I'm here with Ministers Tays from Finance, Panda from Infrastructure, and McIver from Transportation and Municipal Affairs to make an exciting good news announcement about the creation of 90,000 jobs this year through Alberta's recovery plan and our record investments in building and in infrastructure. Thanks again to Clark Builders for hosting us. And as you can see from the site behind me and around me here, they are making big progress on this important project named for a good and decent man, a late friend of mine and so many others, a great Albertan who devoted his life to public service, the late Gene Zwadeski. And he would be proud to have his name attached to this center. When it's finished, this center will add 350 beds along with a big array of specialized healthcare programs, including a dental clinic, a hemodialysis, and a pulmonary rehabilitation. The center will provide convenient treatment options right here in the community, reducing the need for patients to travel all across the city. And it will take pressure off hospitals, off of emergency services, and off of our growing long-term care system. Interior construction in the tower wings right here is underway, and work on hardscaping and the parking lots will begin in the near future. Everything on this site is on track for completion by 2024, with construction creating more than 2,000 jobs right here in Edmonton. The Zwadeski Center symbolizes everything Alberta's government has been working to achieve since the pandemic started a year ago. COVID never has been just a health crisis. It's also been a worldwide economic crisis, with the biggest collapse of the world economy in almost a century, on top of which we, of course, got hit by the biggest ever collapse in energy prices right here in Alberta. But that's why right from day one, Alberta's focus has been to protect both lives and livelihoods. Those goals are what shaped our recovery plan. Alberta's recovery plan, a bold, ambitious plan to get Albertans back to work, to build, and to diversify our economy while building on our historic strengths. The plan included last year a $10 billion investment in infrastructure, the largest infrastructure budget to build things in the history of Alberta, that supported the creation of 50,000 jobs over the past year. And since last June, Alberta's taxpayers have funded more than 100 projects as part of the province's recovery plan, helping to get tens of thousands of Albertans working across the province, building the architecture of our future economy. This year's budget, the one that Travis tabled just about 10 days back, on February 25th, maintains that focus on building and on creating jobs. And in Travis's budget, we laid out our plan, a plan for healthcare and jobs in the provincial budget. COVID-19 has put a big strain on both our health system and, as I said, our economy. And that's why we've taken action from day one to support Albertans through all of this: income support, deferred payments, tens of thousands of dollars in support for small businesses and job creators, isolation supports for those who need to quarantine. We were the first province, I think the only in Canada, to provide large-scale free personal protective equipment and so much more. Additional funding for the schools, and of course, billions more for the healthcare system, payments to frontline workers, more support for continuing care, nursing homes, long-term care, and the list goes on. This year's budget that we just tabled keeps the historic investments being made by Albertans in protecting lives and livelihoods. It's focused, as I say, on three priorities: healthcare, economic recovery, and delivering government services more efficiently so we can secure our long-term fiscal future. Those priorities are all connected, and they're reflected in the three-year capital plan that we are releasing and announcing here today. This is an historic investment of $21 billion and will get 90,000 Albertans working on hundreds of projects across the country. So I am pleased to announce on behalf of Alberta's government this $21 billion job creating and building investment in our capital plan, creating 90,000 jobs across the province. This plan invests in key infrastructure for like roads, schools, hospitals, long-term care, the things that families, communities, and businesses need now and in the long term as we recover and return to growth and future prosperity. And by the way, let me just say on that, I just saw this morning the Bank of Montreal projecting that Alberta is going to lead the country in economic growth in 2021 with, they estimate, 6.4% growth. I spent much of my weekend on the phone with major potential investors from the digital innovation industry, from the petrochemical industry, from the hospitality industry, and I am excited about what's going to happen this year. But that's why we also need to prime the pump with these job creating investments. And that's exactly what this $21 billion capital program is about. Minister Toews, McIver, and Panda will have more details about the capital plan. But let me just close by thanking all the workers here on this construction site and sites like it right across the province. Like Clark Builders, you've done an amazing job of adapting to public health measures. And unlike other provinces, here in Alberta, we kept construction open all the way through the pandemic. And thank you guys for taking advantage of that, because you're ahead of schedule, right? Thank you for taking advantage of that. And thank you for working safe. Like, you guys have a strong safety culture, as we do in this province, and you've done well in the rising to the COVID challenge. No one has faced bigger challenges, though, than the folks who work on the front line in our healthcare system and in our nursing homes. We want to say thank you to them as well. These are the same people who will staff and live here at the Jean Swazeski Center once it's done. And we're looking forward to that day, to coming back here for the cutting of that ribbon, to see the great work that you guys have done and to see the care that we'll be providing to our seniors. And with that, I'll hand it over to Infrastructure Minister Prasad Panda for more exciting details about this $21 billion record investment.
Thank you, Premier. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm pleased to be here this afternoon with Premier and my colleagues, Minister Toews and Minister McIver, to highlight the 2021 capital plan, an unprecedented and historic investment in infrastructure. When we were first elected, we committed to keeping the previous government's capital plan. In the light of the pandemic, we increased our capital spending even further. We wanted to keep people working at a time when jobs were scarce. We recognized that the challenging times, it is vital that we get Albertans back to work and keep them working so they could support their families. That's why in Alberta, as Premier noted, we did not stop construction during the pandemic. And also, I heard Premier already putting pressure on us to complete this project on time. But today at this site, the Jean Swazeski Center at Norwood, this project is responsible for creating more than 2,000 jobs between now and 2024. On any given day, there are 350 people working safely on this site. And the 2021 capital plan creates more jobs like these. Over the next 3 years, we are investing $20.7 billion to support more than 90,000 good-paying jobs in construction, design, engineering, and skilled trades. This year's capital plan also includes 41 brand new infrastructure projects. And these projects not only create jobs during the construction phase, but also bring long-lasting benefits to the community and provide work in operations and maintenance after construction is complete. Last week, Minister Chandro and I announced 5 new capital health projects. In Calgary, we announced that which will support and benefit Albertans for years to come. We have also made key investments in new hospitals, schools, and courts. My colleague, Minister McIver, will speak in a moment about roads and bridges. We look forward to sharing more details about each of these projects in the weeks ahead. Throughout the pandemic, Alberta's construction industry has continued operating safely, building the critical world-class public works projects we need. Taxpayers are again spending at record levels to build the province. And my job is to ensure that these projects are finished on time and on budget. Uh, Thanks to Clark Builders for hosting us here today and carrying out this work very safely throughout the pandemic. And as you all know, today is the major announcement about unprecedented historic spending in Alberta's history, and it's a sustained long-term spending in the future of Alberta's economy. So my colleague, Minister McIver, will come and speak about transportation investments in the capital plan, but I hope media will be able to recognize this historic spending and ask us lots of questions about this capital plan today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Happy International Women's Day. It's great to be here. I want to thank Clark Builders for providing a work site that they have rejigged a little bit to make it safe for this announcement. Very appreciated. We thank you for that. And it's also a double honor to be announcing anything named after Jean Zwazdesky, a great Albertan. So thank you, everybody, for being part of this event today. Also, of course, a pleasure to be here with the Premier and my colleagues, Minister Taves and Minister Panda. I get to tell you a little bit about highway projects funded by Budget 2021 that will be make getting around our province easier, more safe and more pleasurable, and make it more effective for us to get our goods and services to market and to create jobs that those goods and services provide when we get them to market. Alberta Transportation's 21-22 capital plan totals $7 billion. There's a number of highway projects across Alberta in this capital plan, including funding for Deerfoot Trail improvements in Calgary, Highway 1A expansion between Cochrane and Canmore, the twinning of Highway 19 between the QE2 and Highway 60, the Grand Prairie Bypass, Minister Taves should be clapping right now, and upfront funding for a new bridge over the Peace River on Highway 697 to replace the aging Lacrete Ferry, which will ultimately be financed by user fees. One of our biggest priorities this year is to finish some of the generational projects in Calgary and Edmonton that have been underway for some time. After decades of people waiting, we're finally finishing the Calgary Ring Road, the section called Satina Trail, also known as the Southwest Calgary Ring Road. It was opened between Glenmore Trail and Fish Creek Boulevard in October. We look forward to opening that project all the way from McLeod Trail to Highway 8 this fall. Meanwhile, the west part of the Ring Road, the remaining part, will be open no later than 2024. We're also widening the southwest leg of Anthony Henday Drive here in Edmonton. That should make some people happy, to match the incredible pace of growth in our capital region. We're moving ahead with other long-awaited projects in Edmonton too, including expanding Terwilliger Drive, turning Yellowhead Trail through Edmonton into a free-flow freeway, and proceeding with much anticipated grade separation at 50th Street on the CPR tracks where people have waited too long for too many years. The capital plan also renews our $3 billion commitment to LRT projects in both Edmonton and Calgary by budgeting $660 million over the next 3 years. Budget 2021 also maintains funding for the Strategic Transportation Initiative Program, otherwise known as STIP. It includes $25 million in new funding, along with $42 million to complete economic stimulus projects that were announced last year but are still underway. STIP is an important program for small and rural municipalities to maintain and improve their local road network. Preliminary work will also get underway for major capital projects we announced in our economic recovery plan last year, which includes the twinning of Highway 3 between Taber and Burdett, the twinning of Highway 11 between Red Deer and Rocky Mountain House, and a new bridge over the Bow River in Calgary. Alberta Transportation also remains committed to providing capital grants for water projects, for Green Trip program, and the Springbank Reservoir, which is a flood mitigation project for southern Alberta. While we remain committed to these new capital projects, our focus has also been set on maintaining and upgrading our existing highway network, something everybody uses. We will be announcing more details on the capital maintenance and capital and renewal program in the days to come. The 21-22 capital plan will keep up the momentum which we've begun on important projects in every region of Alberta, from strategic good corridors to commuter ring roads to local resource roads, all the while creating good paying jobs for Alberta families. Now it's my pleasure to invite my friend and colleague, the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Travis Tave, to speak about Budget 2021's historical investment. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to join you all here today. I'd also like to also thank Clark Builders for hosting us today. This is, you've got a great work site here, and we appreciate you taking the time to host us. It's really a pleasure, of course, to join Premier Kenney, Minister Panda, and Minister McIver for this announcement. Just a week ago, I tabled Budget 2021 in the legislature. It's a budget that's focused on what matters most, health and jobs. Over the next 3 years, this capital plan will play a significant role in achieving these objectives. The Budget 2021 capital plan supports Alberta's recovery by increasing spending to support jobs now. The capital plan totals $20.7 billion over 3 years, with an increase of $1.7 billion in 2021. This increased funding will support the creation of good jobs as we construct roads and schools and hospitals. It also funds infrastructure projects that have been carefully identified for their potential to support long-term economic growth. And I'll point out a couple of those. In fact, I'll point out one of those in my constituency. That is the twinning of Highway 40. That region south of Grand Prairie, investments been held back in that region because of a lack of strategic transportation infrastructure. The twinning of Highway 40 will result in increased private sector investment, increased job creation, and increased opportunities for Albertans. The capital plan will invest an additional $375 million in each year of 22-23 and 23-24 in future strategic projects to support Alberta's recovery plan. Over 3 years, the plan will support more than 50,000 direct and 40,000 indirect jobs. Ultimately, the government will spend an average of $6.9 billion per year on infrastructure projects. Capital maintenance and renewal accounts for $1.3 billion of the 2021 capital spend. That's an increase of nearly $300 million from Budget 2020. This substantial investment will support jobs immediately while minimizing the need for more costly repairs or replacement of infrastructure in the future. As announced a few days ago, Alberta's government will also spend $143 million on new priority healthcare projects over the next 3 years. This includes $35 million for a new Lacrete Maternity and Community Health Center. The center will provide integrated ambulatory care, primary care, maternal health care, and diagnostic services to Lacrete and vulnerable remote communities in the region. Another new project will devote $23 million to help increase the number of beds in the intensive care unit for newborns at Foothills Medical Center, which is one of the busiest hospitals in the country. Our plan also includes new funding for 14 new school projects, which we will provide more details on in a separate announcement this week. Across the province, health facilities, schools, roads, and bridges are being planned, are under construction, or are already providing services to Albertans. At every stage, whether it be planning or development, infrastructure projects allow for the continuous support of jobs that directly contribute to our economy. These investments are a key component of Alberta's recovery plan, and they will benefit our communities for years to come. Thank you again to Clark for hosting. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to the phones for questions. We'll be doing one question, one follow-up today. Operator, can you please put through our first caller?
Emma Greeny, Globe and Mail.
Yeah, g'day. This question is probably best for the Premier. Not on your new capital plan, but something else you announced today is the carbon capture working group with the federal government. What are your hopes for that panel and the strategy that they're going to come up with here? And can you talk a little about how the oil sector is going to be involved in that work?
Sure. Thanks, Emma. So starting about 18 months ago, our government began chairing a working group with the oil and gas industry on environmental, social, and governance challenges with respect to investment to bring together the best thinking and practices, identify gaps, and how we could better tell our story about the improving environmental performance of Alberta's energy sector. As you know, we've now sort of made that more of a permanent project as a secretariat in my Department of Executive Council. But one area that we have identified as a potential game changer for the reduction of emissions, particularly in the Alberta energy sector, would be a significant expansion of carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology. As you know, we celebrated last year a key milestone for the Shell Quest project at their Scotford refinery, and not long before that, commissioned the carbon trunk line that takes sequestered CO2 from Scotford and injects it into the sedimentary basin. We have a recent consulting report from the Boston Consulting Group indicating that Alberta has some of the best geological formations in the world through our sedimentary reservoirs for deep storage of CO2. And we have been world leaders in the technology. It wasn't long ago when some people, including some of your colleagues in the media, were a bit derisive or skeptical about CCS technology. But the cost of it has come down by about 50% per ton. And increasingly, we're seeing large-scale application of CCS and CCUS technology. Where we were a global leader, we're at risk of falling behind if we don't up our game. That's going to require major investments. Some of it will be supported by the funds generated by our Technology Innovations Emission Reduction Program, the TIER levy, but we need much larger scale. Government of Canada, of course, has committed to very ambitious emissions reduction targets, and it's our view that there's no feasible way for Canada to achieve those targets within the stated timelines without a widespread application of game-changing technology like CCUS. That's why we've started this working group. We've been in fairly advanced discussions with the Federal Finance Department, Environment, and the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So just stay tuned for more on that front.
Emma, do you have a follow-up?
And then I sure do. My follow-up is also on CCUS. Keeping to the same topic, look at me. You've asked for $30 billion from Ottawa on CCUS, whether it's through tax incentives or actual cash investments here. How likely do you think that Ottawa will in fact pony up with that cash?
Well, I don't know about the quantum, but I can tell you that we've been receiving a lot of we've had a lot of good discussions with senior people in the federal government, recognizing they need something like this to have any hope realistically of achieving their emissions targets. And one case that we've made to them is that the Americans have kind of shot past us on application of CCUS technology, in part because they have a very effective, targeted tax incentive for that kind of technology. So one pitch we're making to them is that this could be a great job-creating, high-tech investment that would be a partnership with industry. They've got to carry their share for sure, but it could be a three-way partnership between the Government of Alberta, Government of Canada, and the industry.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Bill Fortier, CTV.
Hi, question is for the Premier. The question is in regards to the high numbers of the variant cases we saw come up over the weekend. Premier, multiple polls have shown Alberta has among the lowest rates in terms of people who intend to get vaccinated. And experts have said you need, around 70% or potentially more of the population to get vaccinated to achieve this herd immunity. So I'm just wondering, people under 18 can't get it. We have a lot of people who say they won't get it. Do you have concerns that the portion of the population that will get the shot won't be high enough to properly protect the population of Alberta?
I'm not too concerned about that. Of course, we strongly encourage everyone to get vaccinated when their turn comes up. That it's not, as the Queen said recently, it's not necessarily about yourself, it's about helping to protect others. So think of others, think of the vulnerable in particular. I've just seen some government polling yesterday, in fact, which shows that a growing percentage of people who are moving from the somewhat likely to get vaccinated to the very likely to get vaccinated. I think some Albertans just wanted to take a step back, make sure this thing was safe before committing to do it. And as we can now see, we've done well over 200,000 doses have been administered. We've had barely over 100 of those cases with adverse reactions, and they've almost all been very minor adverse reactions. So people can see, as more and more folks get vaccinated, that it's safe and that it's effective, and that's the most important thing. People need to understand that if we want to get our lives back, to get freedom back, then we have to have as many people as possible take that vaccine. Finally, the most important thing is we get the jabs in the arms of the most vulnerable folks. Those are the people in the nursing homes. We've already given them the double doses, the seniors over 75, and then we'll go down in the age bracket. And I think by the time we've hit most Albertans over the age of 50, we're going to be in much better shape in terms of controlling the variant and the threat that they may pose. I'll remind you that the average age of hospitalization with COVID in Alberta is 60. So we need to get the vaccines down into that 50-something, 60-something age bracket to be really fully protective. But we're going to get there, and we're starting to get some decent supply. So I think there's reason to be hopeful. And one last point is that the elderly people who are most vulnerable and most protected by the vaccines are far more likely than the younger folks to accept the vaccine.
Bill, do you have a follow-up?
My follow-up, I do. Thank you for Mr. McIver. Mr. McIver, you mentioned a few projects specifically you pointed out. Now, I know some of them. Southwest Henday, for instance, has already been announced. It was announced by the previous government, and then it was re-announced by your government. Now we're hearing about it again. So some of these have already. Are any of these projects actual new projects, or is this just continued funding that's already been promised for projects that have already been promised?
No, there's quite a bit, but I will gently, I hope, remind you the announcement today is about Budget 2021. And every project that I announced has money in Budget 2021, either to start it, complete it, or to help it to progress. So I feel good about that. I believe that the people that watch and listen to your news broadcast will be very happy to hear this.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Bisha Corbella, Post Media.
Good afternoon. This is for the Premier. Premier, I'm calling about this other announcement that the government put out today with a media release about Alberta's government accepting proposals to explore opportunities related to the province's vaccine capacity and to enhance our vaccine manufacturing capabilities. I think we've all started learning about these different businesses in Alberta who can make world-class vaccines, and I think this will be a relief to Albertans. But can you explain a little bit more about that program? How much money will be made available to these vaccine manufacturers? Because as we know, like Moderna, for instance, got $1 billion from the U.S. government, and so we're not really playing on level playing fields here. A lot of these folks have self-financed, right. And these vaccines are potentially as good or better than Moderna, Pfizer, and some of the others. And so I'm just wondering if you have a few more details on that.
Sure. Thanks, Alicia. We don't have a fixed budget on that. We're asking, we want to go through a proper process. We're not just going to arbitrarily pick projects to back. We want to make sure that they are viable, that they can scale up, that they've got the source supplies ready to roll, that they've got these complicated supply chains figured out, all of those questions, and that's why we're going through that RFP process. And if after we receive those bids formally, they check out, one or more of those bids check out as something that's viable, we are absolutely interested in supporting that, potentially either through large-scale orders or other forms of support. And that's also, Alicia, what we've been working with other provinces on. We've been co-chairing the interprovincial working group on domestic vaccine production and procurement. We're expecting a report back from that panel in the next couple of days, because the provinces collectively have a lot more purchasing power than Alberta separately. As I've said to you before, look, we may finally start to get large-scale supply of doses from the big international pharma companies through federal procurement later this spring, and it's well possible that by the time any Alberta producers get to phase 3 and Health Canada approvals later this year, that will largely already have the population vaccinated. But there is still a big, obvious long-term interest in having our own domestic vaccine production capacity. First of all, to deal with potential new vaccines that address variants of COVID-19, but also potentially for booster shots if there's another scramble for supply around the world. It would be great to have our own booster shot capacity. And we should be prepared for future pandemics. Like I've drawn the comparison before, after the Second World War, with starvation in many parts of the world, we all got focused on food security. Now we've got to get focused on vaccine security, and we're willing to make significant investments to make that happen.
Alicia, do you have a follow-up?
No, I guess just is part of this looking at creating a kind of a hub of biotech industry here in Alberta for diversification purposes?
Ideally, that would be, we would love that. And we have been in discussions even for 18 months with different pharma companies that have been kicking the tires here in Alberta. We've been working hard to land them. But part of the problem, Alicia, is federal patent laws. As you know, changes that the Chrétien government made that shortened patent protection drove a lot of the brand name manufacturers out of the country because their investments in R&D weren't going to pay off, because generics would be able to basically take their recipes, their patents, and without investing in the multi-billion-dollar R&D work, they could just reproduce at a cheaper price. So we need the federal government to get serious about making Canada hospitable to the pharma industry, to bring back large-scale investment. And if that happens, Alberta will be at the front of the line to land those investments. I will tell you, though, we do have the beginnings of a hub. We have strong faculties at both U of C and U of A in this area, and particularly at U of A, at the Li Kai-shing Center for Virology, which is headed by Dr. Houghton, who, as you know, recently received the Nobel Prize for Medicine for having helped to discover hepatitis C. And we've just extended an additional $20 million to the Li Kai-shing Institute for Virology. to help to strengthen that center of excellence. And one last point I would make, Alicia, is that a consortium involving partly that institute had approached one or two of the big pharma companies about producing, for example, potentially Moderna on license here in Alberta, and they approached them about a year back on that. But the big pharma companies said they weren't interested. Well, we're now getting a different message from some of the big pharmas, who are realizing because of vaccine nationalism, protectionism, border controls, that maybe it makes sense to onshore some production here in North America. So I think there is potential there, but it's not going to happen overnight, Leisha.
We have time for 2 more questions. Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
James Keller, Globe and Mail.
Oh, hi there. This is for the finance minister and also the premier, I guess. I'm just wondering, in terms of public sector negotiations, we see in the budget the overall reduction in compensation. So can you tell me a bit about what you're seeking specifically in terms of wage cuts and other concessions in negotiations this year? Obviously, some of it will be through attrition, but some of it will be through actual concessions. And how likely do you think it will be that the province is heading towards strikes as part of those negotiations?
Well, we've said all along that we need to operate more efficiently as a government. The private sector has taken a huge haircut in terms of pay and unemployment in recent years, and that got even worse during the COVID crisis. We have lots of great folks working in the public sector. We value them and we need them, but they also need to work with us to make our government programs sustainable in the long run. We're running an $18 billion COVID deficit, peaked over $20 billion last year. And we can't ask people who are unemployed or struggling in the private sector just to constantly pay more with higher taxes. So we're asking the folks who have the benefit of very strong job security and other kinds of benefits, pretty good pay in the government sector, to make some small sacrifices. And that's the approach we're taking in collective bargaining. Because we are now entering the bargaining process with all of the big government unions, we need to respect the confidentiality of that. So we're not going to be releasing our specific mandate. That would be considered bad faith in terms of the negotiations. But we really do hope that we can come to a common understanding. We want, as a government, to avoid significant layoffs. We need the public services. We just need to deliver them more efficiently. And Travis, would you like to add to that?
Thanks, Premier, and thanks, James, for that question. Ultimately, first thing I want to say is how much I appreciate the great contribution of our public sector in this province. And during this COVID challenge, that contribution has been significant. Many public sector workers have gone above and beyond during this time to really contribute and support Albertans broadly. So thank you for that. Here's our reality. The McKinnon panel pointed out that our remuneration levels in Alberta relative to other provinces with respect to the public sector were significantly higher. And our total public sector costs were also significantly higher. And if we compare BC, for instance, Alberta to BC, Alberta's public sector costs on a per capita basis are over $600 higher. That's almost $2.8 billion every year that we spend in Alberta, more than BC spends, again, on a per capita basis for public sector. And we just simply can no longer afford to be an outlier. And so obviously the public sector costs are a function of volume times price. And so we're working with our union partners and with the public service on thoughtfully and compassionately making adjustments. In Budget 2019, we signaled that there would be, again, a gradual reduction in the size of the public sector. We've made great progress there. The vast majority of reductions have been through attrition. And again, that has been implemented as thoughtfully and carefully as possible. We are now, as the Premier noted, just beginning public sector negotiations, and I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that public sector workers in this province will work together with us cooperatively to really position the public sector on a sustainable track for future Albertans.
James, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess just to the minister, just to follow up on that. I mean, given, I mean, we don't want to have specific numbers in public, but it does seem like just from the rhetoric, you're quite far apart, right? The unions say that they're, not even looking for zero; they want to see increases, and you're talking about wage cuts. How likely do you think it is that we're going to see significant amounts of strikes, given how many contracts we've got up for negotiation this year? And what do you think the public appetite is for that kind of disruption? Again, just given kind of the multi-pronged crises that we're already facing.
Well, look, James. Firstly, I would suggest that our mandate is eminently reasonable, relative to the tens of thousands of Albertans in the private sector who've either taken a wage cut or even lost their job over the last year or so. And again, I'm hopeful that we can successfully come to a conclusion, come to an agreement with respect to total remuneration levels. I'm hopeful that we can avert job action.
Operator, can you please put through our last caller?
Final question from Stephanie Rousseau, Radio-Canada.
Oui, bonjour, merci de prendre ma question. En fait, je voudrais savoir, vous demandez 30 milliards de dollars là, au gouvernement fédéral pour la capture de carbone. C'est quand même un très gros montant. Est-ce que vous pensez vraiment pouvoir obtenir ça de la part du gouvernement fédéral? Et pourquoi vous demandez des investissements dans la capture du carbone alors qu'il y a beaucoup d'experts qui disent que les prix pour les énergies renouvelables ont beaucoup baissé et que c'est peut-être une technologie qui est dépassée?
Écoutez, ils sont les technologies. First, I'll translate that into English. I'm sorry for people who are watching live. The question was about the efforts to increase carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology. Écoutez, tout d'abord, le propos d'un investissement de 30 milliards de dollars, ça serait pour une décennie, alors une moyenne de 3 milliards de dollars par année. Évidemment, le gouvernement fédéral, elle est cible pour réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre très ambitieux. Et il faut trouver une solution pour réduire les émissions dans le secteur énergétique ici en Alberta. La technologie avec le plus grand potentiel à cet égard est la capture de carbone. Alberta était déjà une leader à l'échelle mondiale à cet égard. Et les coûts de technologie de capture de carbone a diminué par une moitié depuis que nous avons commencé avec ces projets. En Alberta, ça fait 15 ans. Mais l'énergie renouvelable n'a rien à faire vraiment avec l'exploitation des ressources comme le pétrole parce que ça ajoute un peu d'électricité sur le marché pour les consommateurs. Mais ça n'a rien à voir avec capturer, contrôler, limiter les émissions de gaz à effet de serre provenant de, par exemple, les sables bitumineux. Et alors, la capture de carbone n'est pas la seule technologie, mais c'est une technologie très importante. Et nous avons vu, il y a eu les sceptiques depuis longtemps, mais de plus en plus, il y a des grands projets de capture de carbone aux États-Unis et partout au monde qui fonctionnent très bien. Et nous croyons que c'est un espace avec un grand potentiel pour un partenariat entre l'Alberta, le fédéral et l'industrie. And I pretty much already answered that in English before, just so didn't change my position. All right, merci beaucoup. Thanks, everyone.